One of the most persistent myths in finance is that intelligence protects people from bad investment decisions. It does not. In many cases, intelligence makes those decisions more convincing, more justified, and more expensive. Highly intelligent people are often excellent at analysis. They can process complex information. They can connect ideas across disciplines. They can build coherent explanations that sound reasonable, logical, and persuasive. Markets do not reward those abilities by default. Markets are not academic environments. They are not exams where the best explanation wins. They are probabilistic systems shaped by uncertainty, randomness, delayed feedback, and forces that no individual can fully control. This creates a dangerous mismatch. Intelligence performs best in environments where problems are clearly defined and feedback is immediate. Markets offer the opposite. They offer incomplete information, noisy signals, and outcomes that unfold over long periods of time. When intelligent people enter markets, they often assume that thinking harder will reduce uncertainty. Instead, intelligence is frequently used to explain uncertainty away. Stories replace probabilities, narratives replace distributions, conviction replaces calibration. This does not happen because intelligent people are arrogant. It happens because they are skilled at making sense of complexity. One of the first traps intelligence creates is the confusion between explanation and prediction. An intelligent investor can often explain very well why something should happen. They can articulate macroeconomic forces, competitive advantages, technological trends, and valuation frameworks. Their explanation makes sense, it feels complete, but coherence does not equal accuracy. Markets are influenced by countless variables, many of which cannot be modeled or anticipated. Randomness plays a larger role than most people are comfortable admitting. An explanation can be internally consistent and still lead to a poor outcome. Intelligence makes this especially dangerous because it produces confidence. The investor does not just think they might be right, they feel they understand why they are right. That understanding creates emotional commitment. When outcomes disappoint, intelligence does not disappear. It turns defensive, assumptions are adjusted, timelines are extended, new explanations are added, the original thesis is protected rather than questioned. The question subtly shifts. It is no longer, is this idea wrong? It becomes, why hasn't this idea worked yet? This is no longer analysis, it is attachment. Another way intelligence leads to poor decisions is through complexity. Intelligent investors are often uncomfortable with simple solutions. Simple strategies feel unsatisfying. They feel unsophisticated. They feel beneath someone capable of deeper reasoning. As a result, intelligent people often add layers, more indicators, more conditions, more scenarios, more models. Complexity feels like progress. It feels like control. In reality, complexity often hides fragility. Complex systems fail in unexpected ways. They are harder to monitor. They are harder to adjust under stress. And when they fail, intelligent people are often slower to abandon them because so much reasoning has been invested. This is especially visible in trading. An intelligent trader optimizes endlessly. They backtest. They tweak parameters. They eliminate historical drawdowns. They refine until the system looks perfect on paper. What they often remove in the process is robustness. The system becomes finely tuned to the past and fragile to the future. When conditions change, it breaks. Not because it was stupid, but because it was overfit. Intelligence also creates a powerful illusion of control. Understanding something deeply can make people believe they can influence outcomes. Markets do not grant control in exchange for understanding. Knowing how a system works does not mean you can direct it. This illusion leads intelligent investors to take concentrated positions. They believe insight justifies exposure. They believe conviction should be rewarded. Sometimes it is, often it is not. When intelligent people fail in markets, they rarely fail quietly. They fail with size. They fail with confidence. They fail because they believed understanding reduced risk. In reality, understanding often increases risk by encouraging overexposure. Another subtle trap intelligence creates is resistance to admitting uncertainty. Uncertainty feels like a failure of thinking. Intelligent people are trained to resolve ambiguity, not to sit with it. Markets punish that instinct. Markets reward those who can accept uncertainty without trying to eliminate it. They reward restraint more than brilliance. This is why many highly intelligent investors underperform simpler strategies over time. Not because they lack insight, but because they override structure. Structure is what intelligence must serve, not replace. Structure defines position sizes. Structure enforces diversification. Structure limits damage when ideas are wrong. Structure prevents intelligence from becoming a liability. The most successful investors are not necessarily the smartest. They are the most disciplined. They are the most calibrated. They are the most consistent. They use intelligence to design systems, not to override them. They accept that being wrong is unavoidable. They plan for it instead of explaining it away. Intelligence is a powerful tool. In markets, it must be constrained. Before we finish, let's make this extremely practical, because intelligence is not the problem. The real problem is how intelligence behaves under uncertainty. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In markets, intelligence is not a shield. It's an amplifier. Whatever tendencies you already have, confidence, impatience, attachment, pride, intelligence can justify them so well that you don't even notice you're drifting. And the drift is the killer. Most intelligent people don't blow up because they are reckless. They blow up because they are reasonable for too long. They can defend a position with logic, they can reinterpret evidence, they can create a story that turns warning signs into temporary noise. They can convince themselves that the market is wrong and they are early. And being early in markets often looks exactly like being wrong. So if you want to understand why intelligent people make bad investment decisions, you need to look at 3 specific mechanisms that show up again and again. The first is identity attachment. When an intelligent person forms an investment thesis, it often becomes part of how they see themselves. Competent, informed, insightful, ahead of the crowd. That identity is subtle, but it matters. Because once your thesis becomes identity, changing your mind feels like losing status, not updating a belief. You're not just saying, I might be wrong. You're feeling, I might not be as competent as I believed. And that feeling is so uncomfortable that the brain prefers almost any alternative. Doubling down, changing the time frame, blaming external factors, adding complexity. Anything except admitting that the thesis is broken. This is why smart investors can stay trapped in a bad decision longer than average investors. Not because they can't see the problem, but because admitting the problem costs them identity. The second mechanism is what we can call narrative completeness. Intelligent people build complete explanations. They connect macro trends, industry dynamics, management incentives, competitive advantages, valuation metrics, and behavioral psychology. The story feels complete. And because it feels complete, it feels safe. But markets are not obligated to respect completeness. Markets can move against a complete narrative for months or years because price is not a reward for coherent reasoning. Price is a result of flows, expectations, liquidity, and shifting probabilities. A complete narrative can be wrong. A complete narrative can be right but mistimed. A complete narrative can be right on the thesis and still fail because the position sizing is wrong. A complete narrative can be right on fundamentals and still lose because the market is pricing risk, not truth. If you don't treat narratives as probabilistic hypotheses, they become mental prisons. The third mechanism is overconfidence disguised as sophistication. Intelligent people rarely say, I'm sure. They say things like, the probability-weighted outcome favors this. The downside is already priced in. The asymmetry is obvious. The market is mispricing this. The mean reversion is inevitable. These phrases sound analytical, but they often hide the same emotional driver, certainty. And certainty becomes expensive when it turns into exposure. Because the market doesn't need you to be wrong often to punish you. It only needs you to be wrong once while you're overexposed. This is where intelligence becomes lethal. It makes overexposure feel justified. Now let's translate this into practical behavior. What does an intelligent person actually do when they make a bad investment decision? They over-research. They consume more information not to clarify, but to reduce anxiety. They read more, watch more, listen more, and mistake activity for improvement. But more information does not automatically improve decision quality. Often it increases confusion and emotional attachment. Then they overmodel. They build spreadsheets, scenarios, and projections that create the illusion of control. The model feels like a safety net, but the model is often just a story with numbers. Then they overcommit. They increase position size because the thesis feels stronger with time. But time does not automatically strengthen a thesis. Time often just increases emotional investment. And finally, they under-respect regime change. Markets move in regimes. Low volatility, high volatility, low rates, high rates, risk on, risk off. Intelligent investors often assume that the regime they studied will persist. When the regime changes, the rules change. And intelligent investors are often late to adapt because adaptation feels like surrender. So what is the cure? It's not to become less intelligent. It's to redirect intelligence away from prediction and toward structure. Structure is the thing that survives uncertainty. Structure means you decide in advance, how much can I lose on this idea? What would invalidate it? What will I do if I'm wrong? How will I reduce exposure if volatility increases? What conditions require me to step aside? And structure also means you predefine your disconfirming evidence. Here's a powerful question most investors avoid. What would have to happen for me to admit I'm wrong? If you can't answer that clearly, you're not investing. You're believing. Another critical tool is the two-thesis discipline. Instead of building one narrative, you build two competing ones, the bullish thesis and the bearish thesis. Then you force yourself to write the strongest version of the thesis you disagree with. This does two things. It reduces narrative rigidity, and it reminds you that uncertainty is real because the market doesn't care which story you prefer. Now let's talk about what intelligent investors should optimize for. Not for being right. For staying solvent. Not for brilliance. For robustness. Not for predicting. For managing risk. A robust investor can be wrong and survive. A fragile investor can be right and still fail because they are positioned in a way that cannot tolerate variance. This is why simplicity often wins. Simple rules are easier to follow under stress. Simple systems are easier to audit. Simple constraints prevent emotional spirals. And most importantly, simplicity reduces the number of decisions you have to make. Markets punish decision volume. The more decisions you make, the more chances you give your emotions to interfere. So the ultimate goal is to reduce discretionary intervention. Use intelligence to design a system you can follow when you are tired, stressed, impatient, or excited. Because those are the moments when intelligence becomes a liability. Finally, remember this. The market is not a scoreboard of intelligence. It is a scoreboard of behavior. The investor who wins over time is not the one with the best explanation. It is the one with the best process, the best risk control, and the best consistency. If you build structure that prevents overconfidence, limits exposure, and forces clarity, your intelligence becomes an asset again. Without structure, intelligence becomes a weapon pointed at your own capital. If you remember only 3 things from this video. First, intelligence does not eliminate uncertainty. It often increases overconfidence. Second, complexity hides fragility. Simplicity survives variance. Third, structure beats brilliance. Systems protect you when intelligence tempts you to overreach. Markets do not reward how smart you are. They reward how well you behave when outcomes are uncertain.